In the freezing winds of a Wilmington winter, a young Marine freezes in shock as his German Shepherd stops dead on the beach. Because buried in the snow, a starving puppy is clinging to an old military bag as if it's the last breath of its soul. What Ethan finds inside that bag leads him into a story of sacrifice, legacy, and a mother dog's final mission, one that will change the lives of a Marine, a veteran, and a brave little pup named Harbor forever. Before we begin, tell me your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story. Winter wind scraped across Wilmington's quiet shoreline, carrying the sharp scent of salt and ice as snow drifted in soft, endless curtains. The beach, usually full of running children and barking dogs even in the cooler months, now lay completely empty beneath a pale gray sky. The Atlantic stretched outward like a frozen sheet of steel, its waves rising sluggishly, burdened by the cold. It was the kind of winter day that made even memories feel brittle. Ethan Walker moved across the frozen sand with his usual controlled stride, the gait of a trained Marine who never truly forgot the battlefield. He was 30 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with short chestnut hair and a face shaped by discipline rather than age. His jaw held a faint shadow of stubble, and a small pale scar traced the line beneath his left eye, a remnant of shrapnel from a training accident overseas. Though young, he carried himself like a man who had lived several lifetimes already, someone who knew both courage and isolation intimately. His eyes, a deep, calm blue, reflected the steady vigilance of a soldier who had not yet learned how to stop scanning the horizon. Beside him ran Ranger, his 2-year-old German Shepherd. Ranger was a powerful young dog with a sable coat, thick and glossy even in the harsh wind, and keen amber eyes that missed nothing. His movements were sharp, focused, almost militaristic. Ethan had trained him from the moment the puppy arrived in his arms, and their partnership had grown into something wordless and instinctive. Ranger rarely barked without reason, and his loyalty was absolute. Today's training was meant to be simple. Ethan tossed a small rubber dummy into the snow and watched Ranger leap after it, the dog's paws kicking up flakes as he traced the scent. Ethan breathed in the cold air, letting the ocean's distant rhythm settle his thoughts. Since leaving active duty 8 months earlier, he had been trying to rebuild a life without chaos, without missions, without the constant pressure to make decisions that could save or destroy lives. Wilmington, with its calm streets and gentle sea, was supposed to be a sanctuary. Yet the silence often weighed on him more heavily than he expected. Ranger suddenly stopped moving. His ears snapped upright, body tightening like a drawn bow. Ethan felt the air shift around him, as if the cold itself had stalled. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, his voice quiet but alert. Ranger's head turned toward the line of dark rocks near the water. Then came the sound. A high, thin cry almost swallowed by the wind. It wasn't the cry of a gull or the squeal of a sea otter. It was something more desperate, a trembling plea barely strong enough to reach human ears. Ethan's pulse sharpened. His boots sank into the snow as he followed Ranger through the drifts, the dog weaving with certainty. The cry came again, weaker this time, and Ethan felt something tighten across his chest. He had heard cries like that before, not from animals, but from men on the edge of surrender. Voices you didn't forget once you had heard them. They reached a narrow break in the rocks. Frozen foam clung to the edges, and thin sheets of ice crackled under Ranger's paws as the dog peered downward. Ethan knelt beside him and swept away a cluster of snow with a gloved hand. What he saw underneath made his breath catch in his throat. Curled in a shallow hollow, where snow, mud, and seawater mixed into a freezing slush, lay a small German shepherd puppy. 4 or 5 months old at most, the pup was no bigger than a loaf of bread, its ribs protruding sharply beneath matted black and tan fur. Its paws trembled uncontrollably, claws digging weakly into the ice. But the puppy was not just shivering, it was guarding. Pressed tightly against its small chest, clamped beneath tiny trembling paws, was an old military canvas bag. Faded green, stained with age, frayed at the edges. The pup held onto it with surprising strength, as if the bag itself were the only thing tethering it to life. The puppy's eyes lifted toward Ethan. They were a soft brown, clouded with exhaustion, yet burning with fierce determination. Fear rippled across its face, but so did something else. Defiance. A stubborn refusal to surrender the object in its grasp. Ethan raised his hands slowly. "Easy, little one. I'm not here to hurt you." The pup's ears flattened. Its tiny jaw opened just enough to reveal milk-white teeth, though it barely had the strength to lift its head. It made a faint growl, thin and broken, but filled with the unmistakable resolve of a creature protecting something it believed mattered more than its own survival. Ranger lowered himself beside Ethan, tail still, body relaxed, offering no threat. The older dog's presence seemed to keep the pup from panicking further, but its hold on the bag did not loosen by even a fraction. Ethan felt a swirl of emotions rise in him. Compassion, worry, and a deep, instinctive understanding. The way the puppy lay there, guarding the bag despite its desperate condition, ignited something buried in Ethan's memory. He had seen men cling to fallen comrades, unwilling to abandon them even when the world demanded it. He had heard soldiers whisper apologies into the dust while holding a piece of gear that belonged to someone they'd loved like a brother. This puppy wasn't merely cold or scared. It was holding on to purpose, on to duty. Ethan leaned closer. "You've been fighting a storm alone out here," he whispered, voice tight with respect. "But you don't have to hold the line alone anymore." A wave crashed against the rocks, spraying icy mist across their faces. Ethan extended one hand, moving slowly, cautiously, as if approaching a wounded Marine instead of a half-frozen puppy. Ranger stayed perfectly still beside him, amber eyes calm and reassuring. The pup's breathing hitched. It pressed its chin harder against the canvas bag, refusing to let go. Snowflakes clung to its eyelashes, melting against the heat of fear and exhaustion. Yet in its trembling gaze, Ethan saw the look he knew all too well, the look of a soul determined to complete a mission, even if that mission cost everything. He swallowed against the cold. "You're a brave one," he murmured. "A little soldier, and we found you. You're not alone now." The puppy blinked slowly, as if the words seeped through the fog of pain and hunger. Its growl faded into a soft, pitiful whimper. Ethan reached out, his hand hovering just inches from the pup's fragile body. The wind roared across the beach, but in that small crevice among the rocks, time felt suspended. And with that moment frozen between them, Ethan realized this was no simple rescue. Whatever lay inside that old canvas bag, whatever story had led this tiny creature to guard it with its last breath, was about to pull him into a journey far deeper than he expected. The chapter ends with Ethan lifting the trembling pup into his arms, the canvas bag still trapped beneath its paws, and Ranger walking beside them as snow continued to fall. In the gathering cold, a silent truth settled over Ethan. Something extraordinary had begun. End of chapter. Summary. Ethan, a young Marine veteran in Wilmington, discovers a starving German shepherd puppy fiercely guarding an old canvas military bag. Despite fear and exhaustion, the pup refuses to release the bag, showing soldier-like determination. Ethan rescues the puppy, sensing that whatever is inside the bag holds a deeper story waiting to be uncovered. The storm deepened as Ethan carried the trembling puppy toward his truck, the canvas bag still wedged firmly beneath its fragile paws. The beach behind him dissolved into white haze as wind whipped sand and snow together into a biting curtain. Yet the small creature clung to the bag with the same stubbornness Ethan had once seen in young Marines refusing evacuation until the rest of their unit was safe. Ranger trotted beside him, moving with careful steps, his ears folded slightly back, as if his instincts warned him that whatever lay inside that bag had its own gravity. Ethan reached the truck and opened the back door, letting the warmth inside drift into the frigid air. The puppy whimpered the moment the bag shifted. Ethan adjusted it quickly, keeping it in full view of the pup. Only then did the tiny body relax again, though its breathing remained labored, each inhale sounding thin and rattling. He wasted no time calling Emma Brooks. She answered on the second ring, her voice brisk but warm. Emma was a woman in her early 40s with sand-colored hair usually tied in a messy bun and kind hazel eyes framed by light freckles. She had a slim, athletic build forged by years of long nights and emergency calls, and though she often joked about being exhausted, she always carried an air of quiet capability. She was known around Wilmington's waterfront community as the one who could calm even the wildest animals with little more than a soft look. When she arrived 20 minutes later, the glow of her small van's headlights cut through the swirling snow like a promise. She stepped out bundled in a thick navy coat, breath misting in front of her as she hurried toward them. Her face softened the moment she saw the pup, and the kindness in her eyes turned gently sorrowful. "Oh, sweetheart," Emma whispered as she knelt beside the truck. "He's freezing." Ethan moved aside so she could see better. "He won't let go, not even for a second." Emma examined the pup without touching it, her brow furrowed with concern. "He's terrified you'll take the bag. That's not fear for himself, Ethan. That's fear for something else entirely." The puppy's eyes flickered up at Ethan, glassy and exhausted, but filled with a fierce glint of warning. Ethan felt that stare in his chest. The pup was defending something with its last threads of strength. Emma worked carefully. She unfolded a heated blanket from her portable kit, activating its battery pack before wrapping the puppy with slow, delicate movements. The pup tensed when the fabric brushed against its paws, but as long as its gaze remained locked on the canvas bag, it allowed Emma's touch. The bag itself seemed unbearably ordinary, a faded olive-green pouch the size of a travel kit, stained by salt and worn through at the corners. But whatever lay inside it had carved terror and purpose into a creature barely old enough to survive alone. Emma lifted the puppy into her arms, its head limp against her shoulder. But the moment Ethan moved the bag a few inches to help her, the pup let out a broken cry. It wasn't the bark of an animal. It was closer to a plea, a sound so weak yet so filled with fear that Ethan stopped immediately. "All right," he murmured. "I'm keeping it right here. You're not losing it." Ranger nudged the puppy's tiny paw with his nose, gently, respectfully. The pup let out a soft noise, almost relieved, as though Ranger's gesture had confirmed this strange new team wasn't here to harm him. Ethan climbed into the truck beside Emma, ensuring the canvas bag remained close to the puppy's chest. He held it steady as Emma drove the short distance back to her clinic. The storm worsened, snowflakes hammering the windshield like shards of cold glass, and the truck's heater struggled to keep up. The clinic sat near Wilmington Harbor, its small brick building surrounded by rows of fishing boats wrapped in tarps. Warm yellow light glowed in the front windows, an oasis amid the storm. Inside, the walls were lined with framed photos of animals Emma had saved, each one signed with handwritten thanks from grateful families. The scent of antiseptic blended with a faint trace of lavender, a calming touch Emma insisted on diffusing during emergencies. Ethan placed the puppy on a padded examination table. Despite the warmth of the clinic, the pup refused to release the bag even a fraction. Its paws were stiff from gripping so tightly. Emma moved around the room gathering equipment, her motions swift yet gentle. She reached for a small stethoscope, but before she touched the puppy, she paused, noticing something. The tiny creature's eyes widened the moment her hand got too close to the bag. Its mouth opened weakly, a ghost of a growl slipping out. "It's not guarding itself," she whispered. "It's guarding the bag like it's responsible for it." Ranger sat near the table, watching with steady focus. His posture was relaxed but attentive, the same way he had been during field training with Ethan, ready to intervene but never reckless. Emma leaned closer to Ethan. "We need to warm him up and get fluids into him right away. But if we take the bag from his sight, his heart rate will spike. He's too fragile for that kind of stress." Ethan, still holding the bag where the pup could see, nodded. "Then we won't take it." The puppy watched every movement, eyelids heavy but determination unwavering. Ethan saw something painfully familiar in that expression. He had seen young Marines clutching personal items of fallen comrades, refusing to let anyone take them away. There was no logic to it, only loyalty. And this puppy, barely alive, was clinging to something with the same ferocity. Emma began placing a heated cloth under the puppy's body. Her hands were practiced, the touch of someone who had worked with hundreds of injured animals, yet Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. She sensed that this rescue was unlike any she had handled before. The pup tried once to lift its head toward Ethan, but its body sagged immediately. The weakness in its limbs was severe, but the resolve in its eyes remained untouched. Ethan reached out and placed his hand lightly on the pup's paw, avoiding the bag. "You're safe now," he murmured. "Whatever this is, whatever you were protecting, we'll protect it together." The pup blinked slowly, as if acknowledging the promise. Outside, the storm raged louder, wind rattling the windows of the clinic. But inside, the heat from the blankets began to seep into the pup's bones. Its breathing steadied slightly, though still fragile. Its small chest rose and fell against the canvas bag like a soldier still on duty despite the wounds. Ethan looked at Emma. She looked at him. Both understood without saying a word. This wasn't just a lost animal. This was the beginning of something much larger. And whatever story the puppy carried in that old canvas bag had just become part of Ethan's life. End of chapter summary. Ethan and Emma managed to safely bring the puppy to the clinic. Discovering it will not allow the canvas bag to leave its sight. The puppy guards the bag with desperate loyalty, forcing Ethan and Emma to treat it without separating them. Ethan recognizes the pup's fierce sense of duty, sensing that the story behind the bag is only beginning to unfold. The storm had settled into a relentless rhythm outside the clinic, the windows rattling softly as gusts swept across the harbor. Inside, the warm lamplight created a small oasis against the howling winter, illuminating the gentle rise and fall of the puppy's fragile chest as it lay on the heated examination table. Ranger sat faithfully on the floor beside the table, his head lowered, his gaze steady and protective. His presence filled the room with a quiet, calming weight, as if he understood the gravity of the moment better than any human could. Ethan stood close, arms folded but hands unclenched, trying to keep his mind focused while worry simmered beneath the surface. He had been in dozens of emergency situations, had seen chaos and fear on battlefields. Yet something about this tiny creature stirred a deeper urgency inside him. It wasn't just the pitiful condition of the puppy. It was the way it gripped the bag, the way it fought to keep its mission alive even on the edge of collapse. Emma, moving with the soft confidence of a seasoned healer, stepped back after connecting the puppy to a small warming device. Her face softened as she watched it settle into a shallow sleep. The harsh clinic light caught the freckles across her cheeks, giving her a strangely youthful look despite the long hours etched into the faint lines around her eyes. "He's barely 4 months old," she said quietly, her voice low to avoid startling him. "Suffering from severe malnutrition and early-stage hypothermia. But Ethan, his will to protect that bag is stronger than anything I've seen in a pup his age." Ethan nodded, exhaling through his nose. "He fought me with everything he had, even when he could barely move." For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the soft electronic hum of the heater. Then Emma gestured toward the canvas bag resting near the pup's side. "You can open it now. Just make sure he can see it." Ethan approached slowly, kneeling beside the table. The bag looked even older under the bright light. Frayed seams, faint rust-colored stains, and patches worn thin as paper. He loosened the stiff zipper with careful fingers, as if he feared damaging whatever lay inside. What spilled out was not trash, nor supplies. It was metal. Cold, worn, quietly ringing as each piece touched the table. Ethan froze. There were dozens of them. Small, shaped metal tags engraved with names, units, and years. Some were rectangular like standard military dog tags, while others were shaped like bones or circles. Their surfaces were weathered with time, edges softened, engraving partially faded, yet still readable. Emma moved closer, leaning over Ethan's shoulder. Her breath hitched softly. "Ethan, these are service tags, K9 units." Ethan picked up the first one, K9 Hunter, Atlantic Patrol Division, another, K9 Molly, Coastal Rescue Unit, a third, K9 Bruno, U.S. Navy, 1998. Each tag carried its own story. Each tag was a life that had served, fought, saved, or protected. Ethan felt something heavy settle inside his chest, a familiar reverence he used to feel while reading the names of fallen Marines carved onto plaques in military halls. "This is a memorial," Emma whispered. "A memorial someone carried with them." He continued to sift through the tags with the care of someone turning pages in a sacred book. The small sounds they made echoed softly in the quiet clinic, like old voices murmuring their presence. Then his hand stopped. Near the bottom of the pile lay a tag unlike the others. It was larger, heavier, and clearly handmade, cut from some scrap of steel, edges slightly uneven. The engraving was rough, but clear. Captain 14 Seabreeze Road. A full address. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his mind sharpening. Seabreeze Road was just 5 minutes from the clinic, near a quiet stretch of homes overlooking the colder part of the shoreline. Emma leaned closer, reading it twice as if to make sure she wasn't mistaken. Someone didn't just make this for identification. They wanted this to be found. Before Ethan could respond, the puppy stirred. Its eyes snapped open, pupils widening with fear the moment it saw the tags on the table. Though its limbs trembled from weakness, it tried to drag itself across the blanket, claws scraping lightly against the metal edge of the table as it reached for the bag. Its heartbeat spiked visibly beneath its ribs. Ethan immediately lifted the bag into view. "Hey, hey, it's here. You're okay." The puppy froze, gaze locked on the canvas. The panic in its breathing eased, though its body remained taut and ready to collapse again if the bag moved even an inch out of sight. Ranger lifted his head and let out a low, soothing chuff, as if telling the pup to calm down. Emma gently checked the vitals again. "He can't be without it, not even for seconds. Whatever this bag represents, it's his entire world." Ethan set the bag next to the puppy's paw. The pup let out a tiny sigh, so soft Ethan almost missed it, and pressed its chin against the canvas. It wasn't just clutching an object, it was guarding a legacy. Ethan studied the tiny creature. Its fur was matted, a dull mix of tan and black streaked with dirt and salt. Its ribs formed a visible ladder beneath its skin, and its ears, one standing, the other drooping, gave it a fragile, uneven silhouette. But in those dark brown eyes burned something unmistakable, a soldier's resolve. He swallowed hard. Whoever owned this bag, they mattered to him. Emma touched one of the tags gently. These dogs served all over the coast. Some tags are decades old. Someone loved them enough to gather everything here. And this puppy, he's been tasked with guarding their memory. Ethan looked at the handmade tag again. "So the question is, who is Captain?" The wind rattled the window, and a faint rumble of thunder echoed over the ocean. The storm was worsening. Outside, the world remained buried in cold and darkness, as if urging them to hurry. Ethan stood up straight, jaw firm, the way it always did when he made a decision. "We need to go there. Whoever lived at that address knows the story behind this bag. Or maybe..." He glanced at the pup tenderly. "Maybe someone was supposed to find him." Emma nodded, though worry flickered in her expression. "Ethan, he's barely stable." "He's not leaving my sight," Ethan said. "And I'm not leaving his." Ranger rose beside Ethan, posture tall and ready, as if he understood the mission had already begun. Emma sighed softly. "Let me get him strong enough to travel. But Ethan, be careful. Whatever this bag carries, it didn't get here by accident." The puppy, exhausted, nestled closer to the worn canvas bag. Its eyelids drooped, but its paw remained firmly on top of it, refusing to let go. And Ethan felt the truth of it settle into his bones. Some burdens are not weights, they are promises. And this puppy had carried a promise through a storm alone. The storm had softened by morning, though the sky remained the color of worn steel, and the air carried a biting chill that cut straight through clothing. Ethan brushed frost from the truck's windshield as Ranger sat beside him in the passenger seat, alert and unusually still. In the back seat, wrapped in blankets and a soft heating pad, lay the puppy, its eyes half open, its paw still resting protectively on the canvas bag. The pup had gained a slight measure of strength overnight, enough to lift its head and observe its surroundings with trembling curiosity. But its body remained frail, like a small flame fighting the wind. Ethan took a slow breath before starting the engine. "Ready, bud?" he asked Ranger, whose ears flicked at the sound of his voice. Ranger's calm posture steadied Ethan. Though he was trained for high-pressure missions, something about the fragile creature behind him and the mystery of the bag made this drive feel heavier than most military operations he had undertaken. The road to Seabreeze Road wound along the coastline, lined with pine trees dusted in white and houses half buried under snowdrifts. The wind swept flakes across the asphalt like drifting ash, but the sky hinted at a break in the storm. As they approached house number 14, Ethan slowed the truck, his eyes narrowing. The house was a small wooden cabin with sea-weathered siding and soft golden light glowing through the front windows. The front yard, though blanketed in snow, revealed dozens of small white stones arranged neatly in rows. Each stone had a name carved into it. Short, simple names, many of them belonging to dogs. Some stones bore paw prints, others small medals frozen into the snow. It was a place of remembrance, quiet and reverent. Ethan parked the truck and stepped out carefully. Ranger leaped down beside him, though quieter than usual, as if sensing the sanctity of the yard. Ethan walked around to the back door and lifted the puppy gently. When its nose caught the scent of the sea breeze passing through the porch, its ears twitched upward with faint excitement. It wasn't fear this time. It was recognition. Ethan's boots crunched on the ice-covered steps as he approached the front door. He knocked firmly but respectfully. Moments later, the door opened with a slow creak, and a man appeared. A man who looked like winter had carved him from the shore itself. Thomas Hale stood in the doorway, a 70-year-old former Coast Guard officer with a rugged, weather-beaten face shaped by decades of salt air and storms. His hair was white and thin, swept back from a forehead lined with deep grooves, and his eyebrows were thick and expressive. His jaw was sharp, dusted with a gray stubble, and his shoulders, though slightly stooped from age, still held the posture of a man who once commanded respect. His eyes were the most striking feature, pale blue, the color of distant icebergs, filled with both strength and stories long buried. He wore a thick wool sweater, frayed at the sleeves, and faded cargo pants tucked into weathered boots. When Thomas saw the canvas bag in Ethan's hand, he froze. His breath hitched, his shoulders trembled, and he lifted a shaky hand to his mouth. For a moment, he looked like a man seeing a ghost. "Lord, you found it," he whispered, voice cracking under the weight of emotion. Ethan stepped forward. He held out the puppy, carefully supporting its body. The puppy blinked at Thomas and lifted its small head, sniffing the familiar scent drifting from the doorway. Thomas's legs weakened, and he lowered himself to his knees on the snow-covered porch without caring about the cold. His trembling hands reached toward the pup but stopped short, as if touching the little creature might cause him to break. Is that you?" he whispered. "You're Luna's baby, aren't you?" At the name Luna, the puppy's ears perked weakly. It let out a tiny sound, barely audible, but filled with something like yearning. Recognition sparked in its tired eyes. Thomas pressed a hand over his heart. Tears welled up, thick and hot, spilling down his weathered cheeks. It wasn't the cry of a frail old man. It was the cry of someone who had lost a family member and never found closure. "Come inside," Thomas murmured, voice trembling. "Please, come in." The warm interior smelled of cedarwood, sea salt, and old books. Family photos lined the mantel, most of them displaying Thomas in his Coast Guard uniform beside K-9 partners across the decades. Some photos showed him younger, strong, and stern. Others showed him older, kneeling beside a German shepherd with gray whiskers. One photo stood out, a picture of Luna. She was a large, noble German shepherd with deep amber eyes and a proud posture even in her old age. The photo captured her lying beside Thomas on the cabin porch, her muzzle white with age but her gaze full of trust. Thomas noticed Ethan looking. "She served with me for 10 years, he said softly. "Luna saved more people than I can count. And when she retired, she saved me." He chuckled weakly through tears. Funny thing, isn't it? A dog giving a man a reason to keep going. Ethan understood that kind of bond well. Thomas sat slowly on the couch, and Ethan placed the puppy next to him. The pup sniffed the cushions, the air, Thomas's trembling hand. Then, with surprising certainty, it crawled into the space between Thomas's arm and his chest, curling into him like it had finally found home. Thomas exhaled shakily and stroked the pup's head. Luna knew. She knew she was dying. His gaze grew distant. I saw she was getting weaker, had trouble walking, but before I could take her to the vet, she vanished into the storm, took that bag with her. Ethan listened quietly. Ranger lay down at Thomas's feet, resting his head gently on the old man's boot. I searched for days, Thomas said, voice breaking. Couldn't find her. I thought maybe she wanted to go to the sea one last time. Dogs know when it's their time, you know. He wiped his eyes. But I never knew she had a pup. I never knew she tried to carry this legacy to her child. That bag, he looked at it with reverence, holds the names of every K9 who served with me, every partner we lost. It was Luna's treasure. Thomas looked at Ethan, his voice trembling with gratitude. And you saved him, her little one. You brought back everything she wanted to protect. Ethan lowered his gaze, humbled. He saved himself. We only found him. Thomas gently cupped the pup's chin. You're home now, little one. Luna chose well. Ranger nudged the puppy softly, and for the first time, the pup gave a tiny wag of its tail. The truth settled between them like falling snow. Luna, old and fading, had carried the weight of memory across a deadly storm. Not for herself, but for her child. And now that child had delivered those memories back home. The winter sun hung low over Wilmington's frozen shoreline, casting long ribbons of pale gold across the icy beach. The cold was sharp, the kind that crept through layers of clothing and rested against the bones. Yet it brought with it a clarity that felt almost sacred. Ethan Walker stepped out of his truck, pulling his coat tight as Ranger leaped down beside him, tail wagging with controlled discipline. A few steps behind, Harbor trotted carefully through the thin crust of snow. The puppy had gained weight, though his frame was still slender, his fur fuller now, a dark mix of tan and black that ruffled playfully beneath the breeze. His eyes, once clouded with fear, now burned bright with youthful resolve, the kind that belonged to a creature born into hardship, but shaped by love. Ethan had spent the past week helping Thomas Hale care for Harbor, ensuring the pup received medication, warmth, and steady meals. Thomas, despite his age, was attentive and gentle, though his movements had become slower, his breath shorter, and his hands shook more often than before. His health was not failing suddenly. It was simply the quiet march of age, the same age that had weathered his face, thinned his hair, and softened his once commanding voice. But his spirit, scarred and strengthened by a lifetime of service, remained unbroken. This afternoon, Thomas had asked Ethan to meet him at the far end of the beach, near the old life-saving station where he once trained Coast Guard recruits. Ethan found him standing near the rusted fence, looking out toward the crashing waves. Thomas wore a heavy navy peacoat buttoned to the collar, a wool cap pulled low over his forehead, and sturdy brown gloves that were clearly older than some of the boats in the harbor. The wind reddened his cheeks, and his pale blue eyes glimmered with both melancholy and determination. "You made it," Thomas said when Ethan approached, his breath trailing in the frigid air. "Wouldn't miss it," Ethan answered. Ranger stopped beside him, sitting obediently, while Harbor bounded forward to sniff Thomas's boots. The old man bent slowly, stroking the pup's head with gentle fingers. "He's strong," Thomas murmured. "Stronger than I expected. Luna would be proud." Ethan nodded, watching as Thomas straightened with effort. "You wanted to see me?" Thomas looked past him toward the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a cold, silver line. "Yes. There's something important I need to tell you." He reached into his coat and pulled out the canvas bag, repaired with new stitching, but still carrying the marks of its long journey. He held it with both hands, almost ceremoniously. "I've kept this bag for nearly 40 years, Thomas said quietly. "Through storms, transfers, retirements, through losses I'll never forget. Every name in this bag belonged to a friend, a partner, a soul who gave everything so others could live." He lifted his gaze to Ethan, and in that moment, the Marine saw not just an aging veteran, but a man who had carried grief like armor. Thomas took a deep breath. "But I can't protect this legacy anymore. My hands aren't steady. My legs aren't what they used to be. And I can't run with this little one." He glanced down at Harbor, who gazed up with trusting eyes. "He needs someone young, strong, someone who understands duty the way Luna did, the way you do." Ethan felt a weight settle on his shoulders, not uncomfortable but profound. The kind of weight a Marine recognized instinctively. "Thomas, are you sure?" The old man smiled softly. "Son, Luna chose you long before I did. She carried that bag through a blizzard so her puppy could find someone worthy. Harbor didn't cling to that bag because it was familiar. He clung to it because he knew it held stories he was born to protect." Thomas placed the bag into Ethan's hands. "And now, it's time you take the watch." Ethan held the bag, feeling its heavy weight, cold metal shifting inside. He lowered his head respectfully. "I'll take care of it. I give you my word." Thomas exhaled, a breath full of relief and sorrow. "I know you will." They stood in silence for a moment as the waves roared softly in the distance. The beach, though blanketed in frost, felt alive, alive with memory, with legacy, with the quiet footsteps of those who had come before. Thomas knelt down once more, this time looking Harbor in the eye. "You deserve a name, little soldier," he said, voice warm. "A name worthy of what you carried. A name that honors where you began and where you're going." Ethan stepped forward, kneeling too. He ran a hand over Harbor's head, feeling the strength beneath the fur. "Your name is Harbor," he declared gently, "because you protected the last harbor of memory when everyone else was gone." Harbor gave a soft bark, tail wagging furiously, as if accepting the call with pride. Ranger leaned over and nudged Harbor with his snout. An initiation, a welcome, a salute from one soldier to another. Thomas stood again, steadying himself against the cold. "You boys look good together," he said, "like a real unit." Ethan slung the canvas bag over his shoulder. "Feels like one." As they walked along the snowy beach, Ethan at the center, Ranger to his left, Harbor to his right, it looked like the beginning of a new patrol. 3 silhouettes moving against the glare of the winter sun, bound by fate rather than command. Thomas watched until they disappeared into the brightness, a smile trembling on his lips. A legacy had been passed on. A new generation had risen. And a Marine with a heart forged in justice had found something he didn't realize he'd been searching for. A purpose worth living for. Sometimes God chooses the quietest moments to reveal his greatest miracles. Not through thunder, nor through blazing signs in the sky, but through the soft steps of a puppy born in the cold, through the loyalty of a mother who gave everything she had left, and through a young Marine who simply chose to stop and listen. Harbor's story reminds us that in this world, no act of love is ever wasted. Even when the night is long and the road is buried in snow, God is working in ways we cannot see, weaving hearts and lives together so that what is lost will one day be found again. Just as Luna guided her son to safety, and just as Ethan was placed on that beach at the exact moment he was needed, each of us is part of a greater plan. One shaped by mercy, courage, and the quiet miracles that walk beside us every day. And maybe, just maybe, God sometimes sends us his angels wrapped in fur, with wagging tails and brave little hearts, to remind us that love still wins, justice still matters, and faith still lights our way home. If Harbor's journey touched your heart, please share this story with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, and join us as we continue telling stories of sacrifice, redemption, and God's gentle grace. May the Lord bless you, protect you, and watch over you and your loved ones, today, tomorrow, and every step of your journey.